Hey friends, welcome to the Raising Boys and Girls podcast. I'm Sissy Goff.
And I'm David Thomas.
And I'm Melissa Trevathan.
And we're so glad you joined us for this conversation. Let's dive in. Charlie Peacock and Andi Ashworth are published authors and contributors to a wide range of books and periodicals. They co-founded Art House America in 1991, a nonprofit created to inspire a seamless life of Christian discipleship and imaginative living. The Art House in Nashville, a 100-year-old renovated country church, became their family home and the setting for their work of hospitality, vocational counsel, and running award-winning music, film, production, and publishing companies. For over 2 decades, the Ashworths hosted artists and writers, theologians, speakers, and organizations, including Bono, Mel Gibson, Amy Grant, International Justice Mission, and the One Campaign, just to name a few. The Ashworths have been married for over 4 decades and have 2 grown married children and 4 grandchildren. Enjoy our conversation with 2 folks we love, respect, and admire. You too. It is so fun to have you in this room. Thank you for saying yes to this.
Oh, you guys, I don't know how we... Yeah, but thank you.
Oh my goodness.
A lot of years of friendship is how we ended up all in this room. I was trying to think how long we've known y'all.
Well, the first time we brought a child here, I think 13. How old was Sam when we brought him? And David was his counselor.
Wow.
I think he was 13, probably.
Yeah, it's 30 years ago.
Wow,
amazing.
y'all.
29 years ago.
That is
so
wild.
You guys are so important to us. You really are. And the 3 of you, and Melissa too. You just
right
are.
back at you. You're so important to us.
We have been so excited to get to sit down with the 2 of you and have this conversation.
Thank you.
And we discovered this week that the 2 of you are celebrating your 49th wedding anniversary. And 52 years together. You all, that's amazing. Congratulations.
With that.
It's incredible.
It is.
So let's start there. Will you tell us a little about where you grew up and how the 2 of you met and your family?
Sure. I don't know about that. I'm excited to hear.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. We grew up in Northern California, Yuba City. So about 50 miles north of Sacramento. And
farm community.
Yeah, farm community. And Chuck and I met in the right before our freshman year in marching band practice in the high school parking lot in the heat.
We had to start practicing before because football season would have just been coming on,
So we met and we just became really good friends for about a year.
Several kids. All of us kind of banded together.
Yeah.
We were part of the group, which coalesced around really your friendship with 3 other young women.
So he became the 5th Beatle.
Yeah, I was the
5th. And my friendship of, 3 other close girls.
Yeah.
And then a year after that, we had our first real kind of official date where we rode bikes and met in a park, Sam Brannan Park, and Chuck brought me a little tiny turtle in a Chinese food box. Do you guys remember when you could get a little turtle from the dime store?
Yeah.
Wow.
And that's where we always say, okay, that was our official.
Yeah, and I just commemorated that in a song for a new album that will release in September. So, yeah. Turtle in a Chinese food box. That's going to be a big hit, I think.
Yeah. I can't wait.
Yeah. So anyway, we were 2 kids who came from confusing and difficult households, and we went like this. We clutched onto each other. Much later in life, in our older age, we learned that was called trauma bonding, which we did not know at the time.
We thought it was young love, and it turned out to be trauma bonding.
That's so good.
Yeah. So anyway, we were together and we got married at the ripe old ages of 18 and 19. I was the older woman by 8 months. Yeah. And then we began to have our children when a couple years later had Molly and then had Sam.
77 and 1980.
Yeah. Who are now 43 and 46 years old with
wow.
our grandchildren.
How many grandchildren?
4 grandkids, ranging from 13 to 20 years old.
Wow.
Sam has 3, Molly has 1. Yeah, so that's kind of where we are now. One of them just came back from college, and we're going to get with everybody on Saturday. And which is the day of our anniversary. We're really not trying to celebrate that, but it'll be part of us gathering together with them and raising a glass and saying, hey, thanks for being here, y'all.
And we've done a lot of hard work. That should be part of the conversation. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
What a gift to them to get to see that and to bear witness and be with y'all in it.
Yeah. So then we have, just quick, but so Sam is married to Ruby, and Ruby and Sam are artists and songwriters and producers, and
incredibly
Ruby
talented.
Is the kids' incredible stepmom, and Molly is director of development and Nashville Public Radio. Wow. And Mark is
senior VP
of Integrity Music. And we have, and so the grandkids range from like a really solid athlete, football player, and then other kids are artists, and musicians, and
we still skew a little on the art-centric heavy part. It is great to have an athlete in the family, though.
It's brought a lot of fun.
I love going to games and going to track meets and everything.
That's so fun.
That's us in a nutshell.
Well, a lot more to say that we're excited to talk about. And Charlie, I'm going to jump to some career questions career questions. Sure. But I got to read this because there's so much to it. So you have had an unbelievable career as an artist, songwriter, and producer. Not that I'm telling you anything new. 4-time Grammy Award recipient. 3-time recipient of the GMA Dove Award Producer of the Year. You've worked with everyone from Amy Grant to the Civil War, Switchfoot, The Lone Bellow, and so many more. Your TV and film soundtrack credits are too long to list. I think you're one of Instagram's biggest musicians. Certainly. I see your name pop up all the time when I'm going to pick a song, which is so fun. Yeah. When did you know you wanted music to be your life's work? And will you share some favorite moments from your musical career?
Sure. I don't know that I knew until probably a little later than people would imagine that music would be my life's work, because I was raised in a musical family by a musician who was both a working musician in the community as well as an educator. And so music was always there. It was, and I had the gene, and so it was kind of inevitable, and musical families know this about different children in the family, because if you're the child that walks up to the piano and plays a rhythm perfectly in time, or is humming all the time and you're on key and all those kinds of things, like, oh, well, they may not be a musician, but they're certainly genetically, inclined towards that, because that can happen so early. It's hard to imagine that it's socially constructed yet,
Yes.
I mean, it is, of course, to a certain extent, but there is something mysterious going on there. So I had that following in my dad's footsteps and my great-grandfather's footsteps. And, but I was also very interested in writing. And I loved writers. I loved poetry. I read a lot as a kid. So probably around the time when you might think, well, he knows for sure he's going to be a musician. I was a working musician, but I really kind of wanted to be the next well-known poet or something,
Wow.
or writer, a novelist. And so really the music, because it was the thing that I could, I could work as a dishwasher, right, and make $1.35 an hour, or I could go play at a dance or something, on a Friday night and make $50. So it was sort of like, okay, yeah, I think I know what path I'll take. And it's interesting now, all these years later, I am a writer. I did end up becoming a writer too, and so I ended up being able to do all those things. And they're both an influence from my parents. My mother was a wordsmith, and so got that from her. And then, of course, the music from my dad. But pretty quickly on, by my early 20s, it was obvious, like, okay, this is going to be my vocation. I couldn't keep a job, any other job, for longer than a week. One of the most embarrassing times was my mom got me a job at a hardware store. This is after we were married. And I had an opportunity to go sit in on a rehearsal with Herbie Hancock down in San Francisco. And so naturally, as any smart, young man does, he quits his job to do that, knowing that he doesn't have any money coming in, newly married. But, these are the risks we take. And so I sent the hardware store a little postcard. Do you ever remember seeing like old timey postcards that had a big giant fish in a boat? Like a fish too big.
Oh,
yes.
Pasted into the boat or something. And so it said, I got the big one. And I just wrote on the back, I'm so sorry. My mom or my wife will come pick up my check.
That's great.
So,
Wow.
I was
great.
destined to continue to pursue the music. And of course, as I learned throughout life, if you take care of the music, it'll take care of you. So that pursuit of excellence and skill and ability has been such a big part of it. And then from a Christian standpoint, I really have buy-in on the biblical model from Bezalel and the creation of the temple, where it's not just skill and ability, but it's the spirit as well. And so to me, it's spirit, skill, and ability, and your ambition is love. What does it mean to love the world through music? And so that's been my calling for my entire adult life. As far as, did you say favorite moments?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. I can think of a moment that I thought was pretty transcendent. I was in Poland right after the wall came down in East Germany. And I was there with some other artists. I went a couple different times, so I might be mixing up some of the artists, but I know Take Six was there and a few other artists from Nashville. And we were doing our concert, and we didn't just play songs with my band. We had moments of improvisation too. So and that was part of my jazz background, where we would just see what happens, and sort of risk and go for it and see if the music would take us somewhere, the spirit would take us somewhere new and interesting. And so they provided a translator. So every single thing that I said, like if I said, hey, welcome, or if I said this next song is about, the translator, who was standing like 10 feet over from me, would translate that. Well, I started to see that he was like not only mimicking what I was saying, that he was mimicking my voice and style and hand movements or whatever emotion I put into it. So it was like just like a perfect translation. And back in the hotel room, I had written out this sort of, we had been to Auschwitz. and then came back to the hotel. And then like in 2 hours, we're on stage, right, for this concert. And we were all just completely wrecked by the experience, and each of us processing it differently. And so it was very emotional. And I had written down like a full page of thoughts in my journal. And I just had the idea to bring my journal on stage that night. And I started reading from it. And so it was the combination of God's Spirit and the reading the thoughts from the journal and the interpreter, right? And the band. I mean, we just went to the stratosphere. It was just a really, really remarkable time where I can look back and say that truly was a transcendent kind of musical, spiritual experience.
Wow.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. That's one of my absolute favorites, and getting to record some of my heroes, over the years. Like I grew up listening to Jackson Browne, and he was like one of my absolute favorites, someone that I loved as a songwriter when I was a teenager. I mean, he really rang the bell of this teenage boy's heart, the ache, the great ache within. And so to have the opportunity to produce him and record him, or someone like Al Green, just so many people that I've had the opportunity to work with that I just kind of pinch me moments,
Thank you.
Great word, pinch me moments.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Andi, you are a beloved and gifted writer and editor. I don't know how many copies of your first book I've given to people over the years. I love it so much.
Thanks, you guys.
Would love to ask you, when did you first know you wanted to be a writer, and what do you hope folks take away from your writing?
I was in my 40s when I came to the old building that you guys used to be in Green Hills, and I was meeting often with I think it was that building. Now I'm not sure. But anyway, either way, I was meeting with Bruce McCurdy, who we talked about a little bit earlier. Mm-hmm. And he was doing this kind of experimental class. One of my best friends and I went to participate. And it was really just this class he was developing on calling, finding out who you are, what you love. And I had never even considered that for myself before. By that time, I had a child in college and one in high school. And it was just this time where I was just thinking all the time, who am I? Do I have any gifts of my own? That kind of thing. And through the process of doing this class with Bruce, which was really kind of just a lot of filling out some forms and doing some reading, but it really came to me that I am a person of like literature and writing, and it's always been there. It's always been there. When I was a little girl, when I was a teenager, when I was a grown woman, I've written in journals. I've loved to write letters. I have schooled my own self in classic literature. I mean, it's just, these are the things that I love. Like I would have coffee parties with myself on Friday night so that I could stay up late enough to just have time to myself and read or write. So I took all that in and pretty quickly realized these are the gifts God has given me, but I've never thought about them being anything other than just usual. But at the same time, I had a bunch of ideas floating around in my head, things I wanted to research, things I wanted to write about. And so I started paying attention and understanding that this was part of the way that I would follow Jesus in the world. And that's where my first book came from. I came not to actually being a book until 7 years later, but it was the beginning of saying, I'm going to pay attention and I'm going to create space for this. And so really since that point, I've just been somewhere writing publicly somewhere, since those days. And that was, yeah. But also I still have that once a week appointment with myself where I write in a journal. It's been going on since Sam was 4 years old.
Wow.
And that's really just an archiving, like it fulfills this place in me that I need to write things down. So whether it's for somebody else or it's just to say this is what I need to do to be myself. Yeah.
Yeah, we say in the foreword of the first chapter of our book that we're both epistemological writers and that we write to find out what we know.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
I love that.
It's out of the love of the thing itself. And I think when I write publicly, it always has this element of I want to give an honest accounting of where life is from where I stand. That's and good. I want to usually bring encouragement in some way. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You certainly do.
So
yeah.
it's kind of
mission
both those
accomplished.
Things.
Yes.
We can confirm that.
Yes, in every encounter.
Thanks.
Well, we'll come back to your newest book, but we want to stop off because there's another work that the two of you created that we both benefited from before we even knew each other.
Yes.
I think we were probably sitting in the art house
really?
the same time in Bible studies and didn't know.
Right.
And would love for y'all to talk about that and about how it originated and favorite memories from your time at the art house.
Sure.
/ your home.
Yeah, we were talking yesterday and just revisiting the beginnings of the art house, and we were thinking about it in terms of mission and place and then collaboration. And when we think of mission, we think of the story of me being overseas and doing a lot of thinking and writing about having just recently moved to Nashville and discovering that there was this community and this genre of music called contemporary Christian music. And we knew well enough that when Mike Blanton from Blanton Herald Management and Peter York from Sparrow Records had invited us to move to Nashville and told us, if you move here, you'll never stop working, which was, we needed that at the time when we lived in California. We were just so grateful for the opportunities that were presented to us immediately when we moved to Nashville. But we were a little bit confused by the culture of contemporary Christian music because that just hadn't been our culture in California. Of course, we knew there was Christian music, and we were familiar that people came to our church and played, and so we weren't naive. But once we got here, we thought, oh, wow, people are really coming here to become a part of this. They want to be known by this. And I never wanted to be known as a contemporary Christian musician. I never called myself that, never associated with it in that way. I always associated with people and projects and missions and visions for what people wanted to do, because I came to Nashville with the idea that my mission was to be God's musical person everywhere and in everything, as much as God called me to that. So if someone was pitching me something that limited that, I'd be like, oh, I don't know about that. I don't want, that's a box too small for me. Right. So I started thinking a lot about that, and that really formed the mission, which was, could we start a conversation in Nashville based on what we've had learned from Edith and Francis Schaeffer and Labrie, and by our understanding of the Scripture. We found a like-minded person in Scotty Smith. And he got it, he understood, and he said, let's begin with a Bible study. And so Christ Community Church came alongside of us, and the mission really was to provide a place for this biblical education about what it means to be both a Christian and an artist, and in a very broad view of it. And then that, of course, very quickly expanded to what does it mean to be a faithful, artful person in the world for everyone.
So cool.
And we were so fortunate that I just had in my mind this vision of a place, and the very first time I ever came to Nashville, I drove by this place, which you guys know as we named the Art House. And it had been a former Methodist church, kind of a classic country church,
Beautiful.
And so that became the place. Because in my mind, I thought we need a place that is magnetized in a certain way, that it already sort of oozes story, right? And so it's invitational. It says, come in and become part of a story. And so that really fulfilled that. And then the collaborative portion was all of you that came and all of our new friends who painted and cleaned up. And, in the early days where it was such volunteer collaborative effort, every Bible study night, someone had to drive to Christ Community and get all the folding chairs, right? And then deliver them back the next day and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, it was really about having a vision and then God giving a place and then the collaboration between all the people that came. And that was really the early days. Of course, it expanded a lot.
Yeah. And
beyond
then
that.
we moved our family in about 3 years later.
Yeah.
And then this place becomes our home and the place where people gather. But then it becomes a life. And after we were quite a ways in, we had done a lot of renovating. I had planted gardens. The door opened into our kitchen. And it just became a place that was so much bigger than what we started out. And that's when we really had to begin to really understand this idea of vocation. And what does vocation mean? What are these things God is calling you to as a person, as a family? And how do you make room for it? What does it mean to welcome people? What does it mean to sit for 3 hours in a conversation in your living room in front of the fire and know that has a lot of meaning, so for me, that was the journey, was to learn to have a life that was really filled with people, whether it was, we still did crowds, but we got less about crowds and more about the one-on-one and house guests and dinner guests. And
I like to say that we started with, come all to come one.
But throughout, 25 really, years there, we just had so much a mixture of all of that. And it was so filled with meaning. And it was also really had a lot of hard parts to it, because
a lot of hard parts,
not a lot of privacy. Yeah, and so a lot of the tensions that we lived over the years were, how do we actually tend to ourselves, tend to our family, tend to our marriage, and live in this place that really doesn't have boundaries, doesn't have, we haven't given very many limitations for our own selves in the midst of it. And we find so much joy, and yet there's all this other part. So all along the way, we were always working on, how do we do this? Does anybody do this?
Yes. We really needed a full-time therapist on staff.
We did.
Oh, y'all.
Yeah.
That's so good.
It's when we tell people the truth and say, we had thousands of people come through our home. That's so unusual. It's sort of like, surely they must be exaggerating. It's like, no, we're not exaggerating.
No, you're not exaggerating.
Stretched out over time.
Bear witness to that.
Stretched out over 25 years,
Can I tell you one of my favorite art house stories?
Sure, we'd love to hear it.
So I met a boy at a Bible study there, and maybe I should say this is one of my most embarrassing moments, but I think it was actually his probably. But anyway, I can't remember his name, but I think he worked for you.
Okay.
And this says a lot that I can't remember his name, but I can remember the restaurant that we went to on a date.
Okay.
That was Amerigo's back in the day that everyone went to.
Yeah,
sure, yeah.
And he was really kind. I don't know if I've ever told you the story.
No, I can't wait to
And
hear
he
this.
said, let me bless our meal before we ate. And he started the blessing and he said, God, thank you so much for this time with. Forgot my name in the blessing. And I remember thinking, that was kind of weird. But then he recovered, but then went on to admit that he forgot my name.
Yeah, well,
we never
was
had
good.
another date, actually.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's just, I forgot about that until thinking about the art house. A very silly spinoff story from an amazing place that I think I learned and grew so much.
Same.
Yeah.
Yes.
I know.
Yes.
I was thinking too, hearing you all talk about the vision and the labor of that work, I think it's so reflected in your new book. Like it feels infused into so much of what I've experienced. I mean, even in the title, I want to read this title because I love it so much.
Too.
Why everything that doesn't matter matters so much. The way of love in a world of hurt. So we want to camp out and talk about this amazing book for a few minutes. And chapter 2 is titled, Why Bother Learning to Cook? Andi, you embody hospitality and generosity. I feel like that's in the marrow of who you are. And in that chapter, you say, I'm a big believer in the family table. Will you talk more about that? Just even any ways that you would encourage parents to think about using the family table?
Yeah, the family table has been such a thread for us through raising kids and then creating a family culture after that too. The family culture that keeps growing with grown-up kids and grandkids and extended family. And I think it always comes back to that is the place where we don't do it perfectly, and we sure never did it perfectly. With kids growing up, it was a different time, but still all the comings and goings and all the things that make that a difficult thing to produce all the time, So with that said, still, I think I always found that it was worth the effort because it is the time of day that you gather together, you look at each other, you learn to talk to each other, kids learn to have conversations, we ask questions, we learn the details, we learn the stories, we have our favorite flavors, recipes we pass down, the smells in the room. The kitchen has been a really important part of life for me with grandkids, both cooking together from the time they were just teeny tiny, standing up on a chair, to now when we make sometimes really elaborate things together. Like croissants. We have the right way to say that. My oldest granddaughter and I did that. But it's the place that I think it does all those things. And I think that, like we were both talking, neither one of us had great family tables when we were growing up. We did in terms of extended families, but we couldn't say that, that was always a happy place to be, because it wasn't. But there is really something about what it can offer to a family, to kids, to come together around a table and learn those things. And it creates a place of belonging over time. My oldest granddaughter just told me, she's the one who's 20, just a couple weeks ago, I'm just really dreaming of us having more regular family dinners. I long for that. And I said, well, I do too. So how can we make it happen? Because there's so many schedules, but we have committed to it together between the two of us to just say we're just gonna schedule it, and whoever comes can come, and whoever can't make it can't make it. But it's like it's that important, and and that's really rewarding for me too, to know that in the next generation that has had a really important place, and it continues to. So that makes me want to continue the effort and see that you're always building into these invisible places of a human being. And we continue to take that on into the future.
Yes.
So,
I love that she's the one who said that to you.
I do too.
It says so much about your relationship with her and your role in her life. Well, thinking about being grandparents, and by the way, what are your grandparent names?
Honey and Papa.
This is a sweet thing, because the oldest one, she named us when she was 18 months old. She started calling me Honey just because Chuck called me Honey. So she thought that was my name.
Oh, wow. It's very fitting for you to be Honey.
So that's just all. I would have never dreamed it up, because I'm from California. We just called our grandparents Grandma and Grandpa. But man, it's the sweetest name. And she also named Chuck Papa. So Honey and Papa, that's us.
Those are great names.
Yep.
Well, being a grandparent means having adult children, which has its own shares of amazing joy and challenge, I'm sure. What encouragement would y'all give to parents of adult kids out there?
I'll just say mine briefly, and then Chuck can tag off. I think some of the biggest work that we do at this point is pray. That is the consistent work that we do for our grown-up kids. To encourage, to support, but I think that looks different at different times. Like when grown kids have their own young kids, there's a lot of hands-on support, right? But I think the older they get, the more complex everybody's lives get. There's also the respect of just kind of backing up a little bit and applauding them as they make their own family culture and they do their work in the world and they have their, difficult things to go through. And so you're always kind of learning how to be a parent at every stage, I think.
Yeah, that's good. I feel like this last decade, or at least the last 7 years, have been a big transition for me in understanding what my latest iteration of myself and the family is. And it has been, as Andi said, it's been not fading to the shadows, but definitely stepping back and letting people move forward and encouraging them to move forward, and neither not needing it psychologically or wanting it to be like, okay, the patriarch has entered the room now, that instead it's more like, no, the next generation, patriarch, matriarch, whatever is, this is their world to make, and that we're here. Now I feel more like a servant to the world that they're making than the need to build my own empire, I think that's really at the heart of it for me. And then I just delight in championing them and championing the grandchildren too, and just putting them forward and making sure they have the encouragement and tools for success. And then there's an art to that too. If you are grandparents who have the means to be, in a sense, a 24/7 constant help, right? Then because you have that means, you have to not use it.
So good.
You have to back way up, right? And sort of just call your shots. Like you have to let your people suffer. You have to let them walk through hard things. You have to resist fixing everything, because by that time, at 67 and 68, we know that money is only a tool. It doesn't fix everything. And so, there's plenty of places you can throw money at all kinds of major world problems, and they never get fixed. Mm-hmm. So there's something else at heart there. And we know that there's same little things at heart and at play that are in the lives of our children and grandchildren that will need to be worked out in more of a cosmic scheme than grandma and grandpa, tossing in, a few bits of wisdom or a few dollars on the table.
Okay, as you are both sharing wisdom, we love to also ask you just what is some of the best parenting advice you've been given over the years?
I thought about that, and I think the advice that I feel like I have is I'm not sure I got it or I probably picked it up from a lot of places. But I'll say if I had a do-over, what I would do with my own kids, the one thing that I would want to do that I would want to do it a lot better than I did is to create safe places so that they could come and talk when they were going through things growing up, so that they felt free and they felt like it's safe to come and just talk through this. And yeah, if I have any regrets, I know I tried to do that, but I know that I would do it differently now, like withholding the judgment, it's a way that I can be with my grandkids that I don't think I could be with my own kids. And yet I feel like that is one of the most important things that I could have given.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I very much agree. I remember my mom saying something to me that really stuck with me. I don't remember the exact words, but it was basically the aphorism like, don't sweat the small stuff. And which was super ironic coming from my mom. But it was in relationship to, I think, something with our son and maybe his cousin, if I'm remembering right.
A long time ago.
Long time ago. And this was after my father had passed away, and she was on her own, and she was really kind of more of her personhood was sort of emerging and coming forward. And I was so surprised by that because what I made up about her was that she was a person who was like sweating all the wrong things, like all the small stuff that as an example for my mother came from a Dust Bowl kind of era family, right? And she lived in migrant farm workers' housing when they came from Oklahoma to California. So appearances and fitting in were just huge things for her. So when her son wanted to wear torn jeans, in the 1970s, I remember when my Levi's finally wore out in the knees, and then it was sort of raggedy and knees showing, which is, obvious, like a huge fashion thing today, right? Mm. But then it was just like, oh, my jeans are like, ultimately worn in. So when they reached that stage, my mom took them and put them in the garbage can, to which I then went to the garbage can, got them out, put them back on, right? So we did this sort of thing back and forth, right? And that was a sign and symbol of kind of our relationship. It's like her always, sweating the small stuff, like the imaging stuff, all of the length of hair, all those kinds of typical tropes from the 60s and 70s. And so, yeah, for me, that advice, when she said that, I was just like, wow, that's so freeing to hear you say that. But yeah, that's what I would do. A lot of, even for me, the categories that I had, which weren't my mother's, but they were mine. And they could have been oppressive to the children, or they could have come off as judgmental, where you're saying, hey, you're free to tell me anything, and then blah, 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 which completely shuts them down. So it would be to really, really take a yearly inventory of those things and have a journaling and reminding myself, like, these are just not the essentials.
Well, and that we're all passing through. That's the thing, that I think we were very naive in that we thought if we just tell our kids everything we've been through, then they won't go through anything. And that's dumb. It's naive, and it's not true. And every child is a child of their time, and they're going to go through things. So you shouldn't be surprised by, I guess that's it, that we shouldn't be surprised by any difficult thing that younger generations go through, and they're going to go through the things of their time. And, just one more time, the best thing we can do, I think, is create a safe place for them to talk about that and not have to hide.
Yes.
And learning to shut up. I mean, I raised my hand, just, a simple "I love you" and a hug without any apologetic correction, wisdom bomb, whatever, just let it be.
Well, I love on the back of the book that you're called trusted mentors, which David now would certainly agree with. And you all have been doing so much of this already in this conversation, but the last chapter is hope from further down the road. And with you all being in that place, and we would really say, y'all, in the last, it's hard to believe we've been doing this for 30 years-ish, both of us. And in the last 3 years, we have never seen as many discouraged, weary, exhausted parents who feel like failures. And so thinking about hope from further down the road to them, and you all, again, you have filled this whole conversation with it, but is there any last thing you would say?
Even at this stage in life, I can get really caught in my head of all the regrets and the, take round and round and round. And I feel them more now, or I'm more aware of them now than I was even as I was going along, right? Things that can be changed. But the things that I feel really great about are the things, I try to think, where do we have agency? Where can we actually act? Where do we have agency? And they come back to these things that are, for me, I call them rituals of belonging. They're the things that we do with our people, three-dimensional things, in the world things, feet on the ground things. We read them bedtime stories. We make food together. We have a thing with our grandkids that we do, or we have done mostly once a year, except for COVID. And we just get them all together and we make something and we spend the night. And over the years, it's been, different things, but it's just this thing of you're making memories, but you're doing actual things. Or we've written love letters to our kids when they were growing up. We had a thing where we wrote Valentine's letters and we read them aloud at dinner.
Years, yeah.
10 years worth. We just did it as a full family year before last, where we each took a name. So between the 10 of our immediate family, we took a name, and nobody knew who they had until after dinner we sat around, 2 couches facing each other, and each person read, and then that's when we knew who they had. So it was,
I love that.
an aunt writing to her niece, or a sister-in-law to her brother-in-law, or a son to his mom. It was like that.
Yes.
But things like that and we do it with our kids when they turn 13, with our grandkids when they turn 13, is to say,
they all get a letter.
I see you. I see, these are the things I see you doing. We delight in you. We see these things developing in you. This is where you are right now. This is what we see, who you are. We see these gifts, but it's embodied things that then they can take and either plant in their memory or take along in their knapsack going along in life, but those things I feel like they are, we're imagining how to love, and we're creating something within a family, and our people take those as the place of their memory, place of their belonging, and that's a place where we do have agency to think about what those might be, individually.
Love that.
Yeah, there's small things that don't cost anything. Pen and paper. I would just add, this is super basic, but just make sure your vocabulary includes I was wrong, I love you, and please forgive me.
Thank
you.
you.
Those go a long ways. Yeah. Keep short accounts with everyone.
Yes. Thank y'all.
You too.
So
listening to you answer that question and thinking, of course they were called trusted mentors. That's exactly how we've always experienced you. And we end every conversation with something food related, which is fun to have this part of our conversation with someone who prepares and creates such beautiful meals. And so 2-part question for you both. Part 1 is queso or guac.
Okay.
Part 2 is what's your favorite taco?
Do we each answer? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, you go first.
So the cheese dip, right? Yeah. I have to say, if I'm in a restaurant, I'm gonna go for that. Yeah. If I'm at home, I'll do the guac. And tacos, street tacos, the little ones, corn tortillas, chicken or pork, onions chopped, cilantro, avocado.
That's it.
Yeah, that's
perfection.
I bet you make a great taco.
But not like that.
I
do make a good taco, but that's the one I like. If I'm, the La Hacienda taco. That's the one I love.
Yes.
Yeah. Guacamole. And I'm going to take you back to Garden Highway in Yuba City, California. You're about a half a mile from the levee, which holds the Feather River, which runs into the Sacramento River, which runs into the San Francisco Bay. And there's going to be this little hole-in-the-wall restaurant called El Zarape next to a car mechanic's stall. And I started going there when I was a baby. My parents knew the family, and all our family members went there. And so probably around the age of 5 is when I could remember the taco. And to this day, they've since moved where the location is. They've gotten fancy now, some 60 years later. But to this day, when we go back home to visit our family in our hometown, we always eat at El Zarape.
Wow.
And so that will always be my favorite taco. And it is a kind of wavy crinkle corn tortilla taco shell with the most uniquely seasoned ground beef. And then just cheese and lettuce. And it's really about the flavor of the taco shell and the beef. So I hope this just floods El Zarape with customers.
Sure makes me want to go if I'm in the area.
Yeah.
Oh, y'all. Thank you. This is every bit as wonderful as we imagined a conversation with the two of you would be.
Yeah, thanks for having it with us.
You too.
We love you guys very, very much.
You too. too. Lots of years of friendship. David, what a team we have that we get to call friends who help make this podcast possible.
Amanda Young, our operations manager.
Chris Starrett, our engineer and producer.
Our management team at KCH.
And we are thrilled to be a part of the That Sounds Fun network.
Our music was created by the insanely talented Dave Haywood of Lady A.
And if this podcast felt helpful to you, please consider subscribing, liking, sharing, all the things.
We are grateful for you and cheering you on always.